Okay, welcome back to the book. Now what we're going to do is take a couple minutes, and especially for you that have never painted before, describe a few things that you'll be needing. And I got a lot of them out here on my desk, but a few things that you might be needing to paint this program. You don't need to go out and get absolutely everything right now. These are things that you can acquire over time as an artist, but I just want to present some of the things that you might be seeing in some of the photographs and some of the techniques as we go through the program. The first thing and the most important thing of it is the Heritage Multimedia paint. Now, let me make this caution. This system is, and this entire technique is built around this paint. I have been making paint and working with paint companies for over 20 years, almost 30 years. And there are fantastic paints out there and fantastic systems. And normally paint companies will develop systems or educational processes in conjunction with their paints. If you are learning those systems, especially if it's an older system, okay, if it's a system, say, over 5 years old or something like that, you should probably use some of those techniques. Or paints that are older 5 years or so will not, let me just put it this way, will definitely won't be able to do these techniques. The Heritage Multimedia paint is a brand new multimedia version of an acrylic. We call it an acrylic because it's water cleanup, but it can do so many different things. And even though I have made other paint systems before, I don't recommend anybody use any paint system for these techniques other than the Heritage, because we have tested it with some of those other products and it doesn't work. You're going to run into some kinds of problems with that. The Heritage uses a brand new type of binding system in it, and we're going to use the paint we're going to slow down the paint, and we're going to put the paint on very thick. And that is going to cause some older generation acrylics, and especially bottle acrylics and stuff, to crack. And you don't want that to happen because they surface dry before they under dry, and the paint has to be able to dry through itself. So I don't recommend that at all. Also, we use a lot of complicated mixes. Not complicated. They're layered mixes. In other words, we make a color, then we make a color from that color. And if the Heritage is very forgiving because the pigments, they're so heavily, they contain so much pigment. And so what you want to be able to do is to make those colors and have those given results. You go change companies in there, the amount of pigment that they have in these colors is going to be a little bit different, and then that's going to affect your mixes, and that's just going to lead to frustration, and it's going to lead to failure. So what we've done is we've limited everything down to 6 colors. You can get these 6 colors, and these 6 colors all these 6 colors that I have now, if you're painting along with me and you're going back through history of whatever I've done, I have tested these new products to work with everything that I have done in the past for the last 30 years. So these 6 colors, this new Heritage Multimedia works with everything that I've done in the past, but everything that I developed in the past will not work for this Paint It Simply techniques, okay? So I am advising everyone, and I know we all have lots of paints out there. My goal with the Paint It Simply process, this is my goal, is to reduce down the number of supplies, paints, brushes that we have, and which just leads to confusion, and it makes it actually more difficult to paint. So I just caution you on that. I use the Heritage Multimedia system for everything here. I ask all of my teachers in this program to use the Heritage Multimedia, because then we're on a consistent paint basis, and I'm not answering hundreds and hundreds of questions in emails. Well, this didn't work. Well, of course it didn't work. You didn't use this product. You changed. Okay? Not all acrylics are the same, just like not all oils and alkyds are the same. You can't make general statements like that, and especially with these new generation acrylics. So what we're going to have is in the beginning and intermediate books, this is the basic palette. These books that you're using here are going to use the basic palette. The basic palette consists of 6 colors. It consists of a black and white, which we use to lighten and darken colors. It consists of a red, yellow, blue, which we're going to use to make some of the various colors around the wheel. And then it also has a red violet here. And one of the reasons why we have that red violet is because along the way we're going to teach you how to cool colors. Warm and cool is very, very important in painting, and not a lot of decorative painters teach temperature. You know, some do, but not a lot of them do teach temperature as the initial process of painting. Whereas in the old days, and all the way back to the Dutch masters, anytime you paint light, you should paint light and dark, you should paint bright and dull, and you should paint warm and cool, because the light makes things warm. Well, we tend not to talk about temperatures. As a matter of fact, you can go out there and get all these bottle acrylics, and you don't even know what temperature they are. So what we're going to be doing is teaching you temperature right from the very beginning with the colors as you do these specific mixes. How to warm a color, how to cool color, how to lighten a color, how to darken it, how to brighten up a color, and how to tone it down. And we're going to base it all out of these 6. It's very easy to do. The whole process is made so that we teach you a little bit at a time. We feed you a little bit at a time, and so it's not complicated. We keep everything simple. So you're going to base everything around the Heritage Multimedia. There are sets of mediums that you can get in support of the Heritage Multimedia, and they come in all different kinds of sizes. And the one that we use for all of our prepping and everything is going to be the multi-surface sealer. Now, there's other prepping things that you could use in Heritage Multimedia, light primers, dark primers, and everything, and that's fine. But again, with the Paint It Simply program, we're trying to keep everything as simple as possible. Multi-surface sealer is a all-purpose general sealer. We'll talk more about that in the preparation of it. And so you can have light primer and dark primer and everything like that. You don't need it for the program. We want to keep everything based around the sealer, and because the sealer is going to allow us to paint on all different kinds of surfaces, and it makes a beautiful tooth of the wood. So we're going to need some sealer. We're going to need some extender medium. Now, the extender medium is extremely important in slowing down the drying time of the paint. It's what we mix into the colors to do a lot of our extended techniques. So you're going to need that. So you're going to need a sealer for your prepping. You're going to need an extender medium for slowing down your colors, and then you need a varnish. And we'll talk. I have an entire film on just varnishing. We'll talk about matte varnishes and satin varnishes and how you can make a good varnish product. That's a separate bit of this entire book, so look for that there. But you're going to need a varnish, okay, and to finish off pages. If you don't want to invest in a varnish right away, and you're afraid of it, you can give everything a coat of the sealer. Now, the sealer in itself is also polyurethane, but it's not as powerful as the varnish. But I use it on hundreds of paintings all the time. When I finished it, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, and I'm going to take it on the road, maybe to a few conventions or something like that, I just give it a quick coat of sealer, and that'll allow me to varnish it later or paint on it if I need to change it. And it's a nice protective coat. So varnishing is, if you're going to invest in something, if you have to pick out what to invest in first, get the paint, get the sealer, and then varnish can come later, because you can finish off your products, your paintings, with a coat of sealer, and that works really, really well. Okay, so you need the paint and that. Sometimes in some of the canvas paints and stuff like that, you'll see me use some texture medium. I usually mix this with a little bit of color, and I put it on with a stiff brush, or I put it on with a palette knife or a painting knife, and so you'll see that. So that's something to work on if you're working canvases. And what we do with that is we do that just to take away the weave of the canvas, or to uneven the surface to make it look more painterly. Okay, so we'll have some of that. You will need to, some of the supplies you need is some good sandpaper. Now, the sandpaper, we use this for sanding our surfaces, and you'll see me talk about it, and you'll see lots of photos of it. Sandpaper is very important, because sandpaper, you can sand too smooth. You take away the tooth, the surface tooth, the roughness of the surface. If you make it too smooth, then everything you do from that point on is going to be more difficult. So I like to use and you'll turn over sandpaper. This is a painter sandpaper. You can get it at your local hardware store, and it's made to sand a lot of different things. But you'll look for the value of it here. This is a 220. I like a 180 grit to a 220. I don't like any finer than that. If I'm doing a very fine, detailed little painting, I might go up to like a 320 or something like that. But in the Paint It Simply program, we're not doing that. So we want to get around 220, 180 to 220. If you go any finer than that, you'll make the surface too slick and your paint will just slide around and it makes it more difficult. So surface tooth is very important to the types of techniques that you're going to do, and that tooth is controlled, a lot of it, by the sanding that you do. And so choose your sandpaper very carefully. Don't just go grab something to sand it. Okay, and you should always listen to the artist when they're telling you, you know, what kind of paper they use. I like 220 to 180, somewhere around in there, and it's really great. Multimedia Palette. This is a Multimedia Palette from Ben Fang. I use these. These are what I like. This is what we carry in our store. This is the palette that I recommend. There's all different kinds of palette out there. I do not recommend that you use an oil palette. An oil palette has a more of a tracing paper type of feel to it, and what that does is that'll pull the moisture right out of an acrylic and make your technique really difficult to accomplish. So do not use a palette that's designed for oil colors. This one is designed as a multimedia palette. You can use it for oils, acrylics, watercolors, or whatever. But the multimedia palette works absolutely wonderful with the Heritage Multimedia acrylics. Okay, they're like designed for each other. And it comes in different sizes. This is a larger size here. And if you're going to invest in one, I suggest you invest in the larger one where you have more room to kind of skip around. As far as your palettes and stuff goes, I love to keep my colors right here into the global palette. We have an entire section on how to prepare the global palette and the colors and everything for the global palette, but I've had this one for a long time. This is the actual colors for the beginning palette, all expanded out for the Paint It Simply process, and I put it right in the global palette. You can get these global palettes at a number of different supply places across the internet and around the world, really. It is a wonderful system, and you get the system. There's a lot of different ways you can set up. It comes with a DVD. A lot of different ways you can set up your global palette, but you'll need a palette. Nice thing about the global palette is you can also buy extra inserts for it. And we're going to use the inserts. I don't put out my acrylics onto paper towels. The global palette can set it up on a paper towel, but I don't put it out on that. I put it in these little wells. This is the way I've been painting for the last 3-4 years, and it works absolutely fantastic that way. So you have that. You have when you go look at prepping and everything that you have, and again, all of this is just a general overlook of things that you're gonna want to acquire. Okay, one of the things that a very economical thing to use is these sponges. These sponges here, and I take them and I cut them up into chunks. You get these at in the tiles department of your local hardware store, and I just take some scissors and cut them up, and we have a whole page of it in the book on how I do it. But they're very economical things to do your base coating with, and I highly recommend them. I also recommend that maybe you put on some rubber gloves, especially if you add in sealer to your paint, because that will cause it to stick to your hands pretty good, and so you might want to put on some rubber gloves. Not that there's any toxicity or anything like that with the paint. Everything's non-toxic, but the sponges and stuff are great for prepping, and you'll see several photos of me using the sponges. Later on, you might want to invest in a couple of nice brushes. This is an inexpensive, economical base coat brush. I love to use this especially on canvases because it having just a little bit rougher if you combine it with some texture medium, you can leave some lovely brush marks and give a real painterly look to your paintings. And I love using this, especially in conjunction with the texture medium, where the sponge doesn't do that. The brush is needed. And then this is a more expensive brush. It's a $30 brush, but I use this, and I've even used it for base coating, as you can see. But I use this for varnishing. It gives a fantastic coat of varnish to the end of your painting, and you can if you're all done, if you're approaching this economically, and you can acquire a little bit at a time, you can use the Heritage Multimedia Sealer, and with your sponge at the end of your painting, just dampen your sponge and go over and put a coat of sealer on to protect it all, and then slowly acquire some of these products that will make your painting journey a little bit easier, so you don't have to lay out a whole bunch of money right away. you'll need some types of tracing paper, and tracing paper can either come flat or it comes in rolls. I find it more economical to get it in the big rolls. I buy everything in big rolls. Sometimes I use the plastics like this, and again, you can find these at your local art stores and stuff like that. But plastics are nice to set over because you can see the design. And I use the very thin 3 mil. There's 3 mil and 5 mil. I use the thinner 3 mil because it's more pliable. And then I use, we have these on our website and stuff. I use this. This is called a zebra pen. It is a permanent marking pen. So if I want to trace something off, I can put the mark right here onto the plastic, and it's instantaneously permanent there. So I use it for, taking off designs or whatever I want to do. And then if I go to put this design on something, I can see exactly where it is and how it's placed as I'm going to transfer the design. But it's instantaneously permanent. It costs like $5 or so for a zebra pen that's like this, and we get these from Japan. They're the only ones that I've found in all these years that are instantly permanent. Some of the others that I like, the Sharpies and stuff, you can put it on there, then still they'll take a few minutes to dry. And they can smear a little bit, so you got to be a little careful with that. But I like to use these zebra pens if I'm taking off the pattern, or you can use tracing paper to take that off, and then you'll need to transfer it down to your surface. When you transfer it down to your surface, make sure you get the right kind of transfer paper. And I suggest 2 colors. I suggest a white and a gray here. And what I mean by test it, there are certain types of transfer paper out there that are not made to be removed. And so make sure that it says it's a removable one. These right here come off with just a rubber eraser. That's what I use. I use a plastic eraser, which you'll look at getting. So they can be removed quite easily, so using a plastic eraser. But you might want to get some transfer paper. These are transfer papers, and check them out. If you're ever unsure about that, we have all of these supplies that you need on our online store, and as do all of our Heritage and Global Supply outlets have all of these same products, and you can find these for you. But make sure that your transfer paper, that's a real key. Make sure it is a removable one, and test it on the surface. Prepare your surface, test it, transfer it, draw a little line on it, transfer it, and then make absolutely sure that you can use that it's going to be removed. You can also do what I do with a lot of these designs is I'm going to do brush sketching, so I won't be transferring very much design. Our goal is to try to get you to do more brush sketching. I know when you're beginning out, that's scary to go do something, but we're going to show you how to paint flowers in a very simple way, and how to visualize circles and everything. So, my goal is to start reducing some of these things of transferring and everything that you have to do, and make art a little bit more fun. The last thing I want to talk about is you will need eventually at some point in time into the system a palette knife, or what we call a painting knife. Now, just real quick, there's all different kinds of them. I've used all of these. A knife that's flat like this, let me just move this off so you can see. A knife that's flat like this is called a palette knife. Okay, and that's for mixing up your colors on your surface. And so this would be a smaller little palette knife, and they come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes, and everyone's got a specialized one or whatever. Okay, you can use whatever you like. The ones that have a crook down like this is called a painting knife. And the painting knife, what it means is that the artist will actually use this in some painting techniques. Now, for painting knives, the ones that I like is this one right here, because it has more of a point on it. I use this in a lot of landscapes and everything like that. I won't use it too much in flowers here, but I have used it on several videos in painting flowers and painting things. And so if you were going to get one, I wouldn't get it, because a painting knife can mix colors on your surface just as easy as a palette knife. So I would get a painting knife. I'd get a crook-handled painting knife like this, and I'd look for one that comes to a little bit of a point. So if you're only going to get one, get something like this. This will be your most versatile, and this is what I use for everything anyway. So, or sometimes I use a rounded version of it and everything. But I've used them all. This is the one that I really, really like. I like it because of its size, and it has this one that's right here. See, to me, this painting knife and this painting knife, this one's the more versatile one because it's larger, but they both have the same point on it. So this one's more versatile, and that's the one that I highly recommend. Okay. Now, also for storing some of your colors, if you don't want to invest into the global palette or anything like that, you can go right down to your restaurant supply store and get a bunch of these little 2-ounce serving containers. You can take these, mix these up, mix your color up, and store them right inside of there. Anytime that you do put color into one of these things, though, make sure you mix some extender into that. A good 10 to 20%. Give a good squirt of extender in there, just to make sure it's going to stay nice. Then snap the lid, and they will stay indefinitely in a lid like this, in a container that's like this, or into the global palette. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have enough in here, enough paint in here, because when you put paint into a surface like this, there's an air volume versus the paint volume, and then that air volume, especially if it's a dry air, if you have just a little bit of paint in there, it's going to pull the moisture up. The air, even that little bit of air, this air will pull the moisture out and harden out the paint. So as you increase the paint volume, the air volume, of course, goes down, and so its ability to pull the moisture out goes down, and then the paint will stay longer. So the more full these things are, the longer they will be able to keep the paint. Okay, if you have just a little bit of paint, and you need to save it, but yet you don't want to mix up a whole bunch to try to save it, then I suggest you take a mister bottle or something, or put a little water or a little more extender in here. What you're doing by misting the surface or adding more water is you're adding more liquid, more moisture, water vapor into it, and that will keep a more humid environment for the paint. And so if you have just a little tiny bit of paint, mist it, and same thing goes with the global palette. You'll see me show you that later on. But you always, an artist, especially dealing with acrylics, is always going to worry about the amount of water or the moisture that's in their container when they go to save product. That's what I want you to worry about. So if you're saving just a little bit, increase the moisture, mist it, or do something to increase the moisture, and the paint will last quite a bit longer. Okay? So you have some sandpaper, some tracing paper that you'll need to invest in. You're going to get a tile setter sponge. You'll see me use that for a lot of the prepping of the pieces. That's what I use. And then you'll need to get your 6 colors. You'll need to get some sealer, some extender medium. Eventually down the road you might want to get some texture medium and some varnish, okay, to get you started out, and a nice multimedia palette. That multimedia palette is key because that's the surface. So don't just go get something that's cheap out there because this is on sale. That multimedia palette in your learning process is the key because it's the surface that you're going to judge the feel of your paint on. And the wrong kind of surface can pull the moisture out and make painting just so very difficult to do, okay? Then you have your painting brushes that you're going to get, and these basically for the books that we're doing right now, I'm going to be using a Fusion size 4 and a 3/4 inch. The 3/4 inch will do a lot of our background. I'm going to do most of the painting here into the books here with it. Well, I'm going to do all of it here with the number 4, a little number 4 Fusion. I'm going to show you all kinds of brushing techniques. Now, what will happen after this particular brush here? Let me zoom in just a little closer here. This particular brush, when you look at this brush here, this one has been through the ringer here. You can see it's pretty messed up, and this is a brand new one here. Now, when a brush gets old like this, okay, it gets old and flared out, and this one's painted probably 40 paintings, but when it gets old and flared out, don't throw it away, because that's when the brush actually starts getting better and better and better to paint a lot of casual flowers. So as you destroy a brush, which is going to happen, especially if you get after 10 paintings or so and working a lot with it, don't throw it away, because there are certain flowers we're going to learn and everything that an older brush paints so much prettier because it's so much more casual, and we'll talk more about that when we get in techniques. But your Fusion brushes, at no time do they ever wear out. They're going to get old and frayed, and you save those for those particular techniques, okay? So there's a little bit, or a little longer than a little bit, on some of the material that you're going to need to paint through the program. We'll get right into the program now. Thanks for joining me, and we'll get right into setting up your palette, okay? See you there.